BBC Radio Leeds.
So you're listening to BBC Radio Leeds on a Saturday morning. And then we'll meet the inspirational man that after an accident at 18 and losing his arm, learned to fly planes. He's just been recognised with a Yorkshire Inspiration Award.
On radio,
Online,
and on your mobile. Your station for Yorkshire.
BBC Radio Leeds.
Johnny I'Anson.
BBC Radio Leeds.
And in a moment's time, we'll meet Steve Robinson from Leeds, who's just been recognised as one of the most inspirational people in Yorkshire. He had an accident at the age of 18 where he lost his arm. That hasn't stopped him, and he's since learned to fly planes. I've had one flying lesson, and it's really hard and really scary. So we'll speak to Steve on the programme in a moment's time. Now, one of those stories next which puts most of us to shame, and I guess puts a lot of things in perspective, particularly when we say, I'm going to do this. I'm definitely going to do it. How many times have we said we're going to try something new and never really gotten round to it? Steve Robinson from Leeds lost his arm in a motocross accident when he was just 18, but that hasn't stopped him from making the most of his life in every possible way, including learning to fly a plane. In fact, he calls himself, appropriately, the one-armed pilot, and he's just been crowned the most inspirational individual at this year's Yorkshire Choice Award. And I'm pleased to say he's here with the award in the studio. Morning to you, Steve. How are you?
Good morning.
It's amazing to think you've managed to do this in spite of what happened to you when you were 18. And if it's all right, can you just take us back and briefly tell us what happened that day?
Yeah, well, it's a long time ago now, I must admit. But I woke up in hospital, and the nurses said to me, "You've lost your right arm, Steve, in a motorcycle accident." And I didn't believe them because I could still feel my right arm. And I didn't know about this phantom limb thing that people that have lost a limb experience. And you know, you just have to get on with it. You wake up and you think, well, what do I do now? All your life's changed, basically. All the jobs they had lined up had totally gone. I was unemployable. And back in the 1980s, there wasn't any such thing as disability discrimination. So you'd go to a job interview and they'd just say, no, we don't want you.
Really?
You've got one arm, and that's the end of it. So basically, you have to go out there and create your own future. And that's basically what I did. I went out there, tried to do things that I knew, and tried to learn new skills, and basically just enjoy myself and hopefully earn some money along the way, which fortunately I did.
Do you think that the people telling you no changed you, or did you always have that inside of you?
No, the people telling me no really pushed me on. I must admit, if people just said, oh, yes, you can do that, I maybe would have thought, okay, yeah, I can do it. They said I can do it, then I have nothing to prove. The fact that people said to me, you won't be able to do that, you won't be able to do this, was a bit like a red rag to a bull. I had to prove to myself and to them that I could do these things. The downside of that is I would do things that I'd never even considered doing.
Yeah.
You know, like trying to do a one-handed handstand. Who wants to do a one-handed handstand? Only a guy with one arm.
I'll get you to do that in a minute.
Yeah, I can't do it anymore, unfortunately.
But it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting that how different, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but how your life might not have been maybe as rich as it is now had you not had people being negative with you at first.
It really does help, and it sounds crazy, that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the more that people say to you, you can't do this, you can't do that, the more it gives you a little bit of fight. And you want to prove to people. And that was the same with a lot of things. I got back on a motorbike with one arm, just to prove to myself and everybody I could still ride a motorbike.
That doesn't sound safe,
No,
Steve.
it wasn't, and that's why I packed that in. I decided I don't no longer want to do that. And somebody had said to me a long time ago, you won't be able to do horse riding or anything like that. And I was afraid of horses, so I decided I'd take up horse riding. And I came fifth in the national dressage qualifiers.
Hang on a minute. We don't know anything about this.
Oh, you didn't know about the horse riding?
When was this?
This was 2014. I came fifth in the national dressage qualifiers.
Really?
And I still compete in dressage today.
So at what point did somebody say to you, you'll never be able to fly a plane?
Actually, it was a friend of mine, and I'd applied for a flying scholarship through a charity called FSDP, which is Flying Scholarship for the Disabled, and they gave me this flying scholarship, and I thought, wow. And I actually applied for it because I was afraid of flying. Right. I needed 3 weeks hypnotherapy to fly to Spain to visit some friends. And I decided I wanted to deal with that fear as well, so I applied for this flying scholarship. And a friend of mine said to me, the actual flying scholarship at the beginning didn't work because the prosthetic arm the NHS made for me didn't work, and that took them 12 months to make. And then when they made Mark II prosthetic arm, that took another 12 months to make, that didn't work either. And this friend of mine said to me, you won't be able to fly an aircraft, Steve. I've asked my friends in the RAF and they said, definitely, you won't be able to fly an aircraft with one arm. Well, I wish you'd never said that. Because that really encouraged me to make my own prosthetic arm. So I made my own.
You made your own?
I made my own.
How'd you go about making your own prosthetic limb?
Well, you go out and you buy a milling machine, which is a piece of metalwork equipment, and you go out and you buy a lathe, which is another piece of metalwork equipment. Then you go and buy a lump of aluminium, and you just start to formulate this idea you've got in your mind of what you want this limb to do, and it takes its own shape. And it's a process of problem solving. You get to one particular part and you think, oh, well, that won't do this, and I need to solve this problem. You just solve problem after problem after problem until eventually I had this working, functioning limb.
See, I've done a lot of DIY in the past 12 months after buying a house.
But you've not made an arm.
Well, I've not made an arm, and I've got both arms to do it. I mean, we've got to remember you're doing this with one arm.
I am, yeah.
That's incredible.
But the benefit is I've never done it with two arms.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to guess your age, but you've probably lived a bit longer without both arms than you have with both arms.
The 19th of April, 1982 is the day that I lost my right arm.
Right, okay.
And it was the 19th of April just a few days ago.
Right.
And that was my 35th year
yeah.
with one arm.
Do you remember what it was like to have both arms?
I do, but it seems like I've had two lifetimes in one life. So I feel like I'm 35 because that new life was a life with one arm. I do remember the life with two arms, although it's vague and it's more like a dream than it is reality because I lost a lot of my memory after the accident. So what I remember is sort of like is quite. You know, it is vague. I don't remember everything, and I don't remember people from school.
Right, really?
You know, somebody will say to me, "That's blah blah. That's Johnny from school. Do you remember him?" And I keep saying, "No, not a clue."
It's a different life.
Yeah, different life.
So, I mean, I've had one flying lesson as part of something we did here.
How did that go?
It was quite hairy. I loved it, but there's a lot going on in a plane, and if you struggle to ride a motorbike or drive a car, I can imagine flying a plane is even more difficult, Steve, with one arm.
Well, driving a car is dead easy. But then flying an aircraft after a little while becomes easy. When you first start, you've got overload. There's so much to do. You've got to talk on the radio. You've got to do your mixture. You've got to do your carburetor heat. You've got to do all sorts of things. You've got to look at all these instruments. And to start with, there's a big workload. And it's a steep learning curve, really. But then after a little while, when things start to sink in, then you start to relax. And it becomes second nature. Once you're up there and you're up at altitude and you're on to cruise, so you pull your power back into cruise, you're basically just keeping the wings straight and level.
Yeah.
And that's about it. And you're looking for traffic and you're talking to the radio.
Have you ever had passengers in the plane who didn't realise you had one arm until they got in and saw you with one arm?
Yes. We had a guy that was doing a TV programme and he had a challenge to go flying. And he was with a maid in Leeds. They were looking for a new star. And all these people had challenges. One girl had to go do yoga. I know yoga. Another guy had to go and play with snakes. And another girl had to do some aqua aerobics. And the final guy had to go flying. And they put him in the aircraft and they said, by the way, your pilot's only got one arm.
What was his face like?
They were terrified.
Especially when he's seen his mate do aqua aerobics.
Yeah.
Why have I got the one-arm pilot? What's going on here? I mean, I laugh, but it is an incredible thing. And you're obviously, you don't mind talking very honestly and having a joke about it too. But it is, I guess, quite an unusual thing and maybe a worrying thing for people to think about being in charge of an aircraft with just one arm.
They must be worried. People are still scared to get in the car with me.
Are they?
But it's just an automatic. You just hold onto the steering wheel and put your foot down. Well, it's very similar in an aircraft. An aircraft is an automatic. It doesn't have gears.
Yeah, but you're at 10,000 feet, Steve. That's the difference.
Yeah, but if anything goes wrong, you've got loads of time to correct. Somebody said that to me a while ago. We were doing some flight training and it all went wrong. And we were testing the prosthetic arm and it fell off at 3,500 feet.
The arm did?
The arm fell off. And as it fell off and it hit the ground, the aircraft went into a nosedive and spiralled through a cloud. So I said to my instructor, John, you've got control. And he said to me, no, Steve, you've got to learn to fly this aircraft with one arm. At which point I said, no, my arm's fallen off. And as we went into this dive. But then he said to me at that point, he said, don't worry, Steve, there's 3,500 feet below us. He said, there's loads of time to correct. Yeah. So 10,000 feet's even better.
I think you're an amazing guy, Steve. I can see why you've got the Inspiration Award. What was that like when you picked it up?
I totally wasn't expecting it. They call people's names out. There's 47 finalists. They call 47 people that have been nominated, and they call out the 4 finalists. And you stand up at your table, and I was basically the last person that called out as a finalist. I thought, there's no way I haven't got this. There were some real big names that I was competing against. And all of a sudden it was, the winner is Stephen Robinson. And I was shocked for a while. I was looking around and saying to my friends at my table, I said, did they say Stephen Robinson? Because you just don't expect it.
Yeah.
I thought somebody else was going to get it. I didn't think I was going to get it.
Yeah, well,
I'm super chuffed I have.
what an amazing thing to add to the lists. You
Wonderful,
can
isn't it?
now not only do a one-armed handstand, but you're also Yorkshire's most inspirational person. Thank
I
you
am.
so much for being with us, Steve. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much.
And I'd
Nice
love to
meet
come
you.
up with you someday as well.
You're more than
Oh,
welcome.
honestly, I'd love to. We'll arrange it.
We'll let you take control and you can fly it.
I'm all for that. I'm
Good.
up for that. Thank you so much for being with us. Let's practice that one-armed handstand now.
Oh,
One in the
okay,
corner
okay.
over there.
Oh, yeah. Look.
How amazing is Steve? It was great, isn't he? Steve's the one-armed pilot. I'm just thinking about that lad that turned up when they were doing that TV show. How one of them gets to do acroaerobics, and then the other gets in the plane, and nobody's told him that his pilot's got one arm. And he sets his eyes on Steve. Why don't I get to do acroaerobics? Steve there, the most inspirational man in Yorkshire. It's official, because Steve Robinson has the trophy from the Yorkshire Choice Awards and everything. 81333, start the text with the word Leeds or at BBC Leeds on Twitter to contact the programme today.
On radio
Online.
and on your mobile. Your station for Yorkshire.
BBC Radio Leeds.